Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And as always, I'd like to thank the people that sent me, tagged me, linked me, whatever it was, to get me a ton of these breaches. It is always appreciated. And that is David Walker, Barrett Peterson, Chris Fallon, and of course, Jason Dance. Guys, thank you so much. And with that, let's dive right in because there is no time to spare this week. We're going to start with Austrian crane and lifting manufacturer Paul Finger. They were targeted in an ongoing cyber attack that basically disrupted their IT systems and business operations. They have a security notice out entitled Cyber Attack at Paul Finger Group, and it also states that their enterprise resource planning or ERP systems are down and that, quote, a large portion of the group's worldwide operations are affected. Now, in an email seen by Bleeping Computer, Paul Finger is alerting partners at the attack and advising them to basically use alternative channels such as mobile phones, SMS text messaging, WhatsApp, etc. to communicate with their Paul Finger contacts. It's obviously a very huge problem, and they're also asking partners not to create further purchase orders at the moment. So that is nuts. It's ongoing. Hopefully they will get that resolved. Moving on. Let's head on back to my neck of the woods in Cook County, Illinois. That is home to Chicago, and Cook County is the second most populous county in the United States, just after Los Angeles. Now, basically a non-password protected database belonging to Cook County exposed 323,000 court records for at least 4 months, according to researchers. The database exposed the names of various people involved in very sensitive criminal, domestic abuse, or child custody court cases. The researchers discovered this database on September 26 and notified Cook County's chief technology officer of the exposure. However, according to reports, the database remained publicly exposed until basically this past Monday when it was finally secured and restricted. So that's obviously a huge problem. And hopefully none of that information got out, especially when you're talking about domestic abuse and child custody cases. That is very sensitive. Moving on. Let's go head on over to the United Kingdom and talk about the Woodlands Trust. They are apparently UK's largest woodland conservation charity, although the article said conversation charity, and I don't think woodland conversation is a thing, but people in the UK, please feel free to correct me. Now, the Woodland Trust has confirmed that it was hit with a cyber attack last month, describing the incident as, quote, sophisticated and high level that took many of their services offline. It is believed the attack took place on the 14th of December of 2020, and Woodland Trust hasn't said when they discovered the attack, only that they took immediate action to mitigate it as soon as they became aware of it. And so here we are. Hopefully Woodland Trust will be okay. Heading back to the United States, let's talk about U.S. Cellular. They're one of the major carriers for mobile here. They basically suffered a data breach after attackers gained access to their CRM and viewed customer accounts. Now, in a data breach notification filed with the Vermont Attorney General, which is part of Vermont's disclosures, U.S. Cellular stated that one of their retail store employees was scammed into downloading software onto a retail location's computer. This software allowed the attacker to gain access to the computer remotely, and then when the employee was logged into the customer relation management or CRM, they gained access to that as well. So they're talking about customers' name, address, PIN code, and cellular telephone numbers, as well as information about your wireless services, including your service plan, usage billing statements that are known as the customer proprietary network information, and on, according to the data breach. U.S. Cellular states that customer social security and credit card information was not accessible as they were masked in the CRM. So hopefully that is true, but heads up if you use U.S. Cellular. Moving on. Let's talk about Ransomware Network. You may have heard of them. I've mentioned them before in Breaches of the Week. And the reason why we're talking about Network directly is because a Canadian man is under arrest and facing charges that he helped install this ransomware and corrupted computer systems at several organizations, including a hospital network recently in the Philadelphia area. Now, this individual, Sebastian Vachon Desjardins, was taken into custody and jailed in Canada. Federal authorities are alleging that he and others took computer systems hostage at other places such as the Kroger Keystone Health System, as well as the University of California at San Francisco, and assisted living facilities in Maryland. And they obviously were demanding ransom in order to remove the virus. Authorities also recovered about $500,000 US in cryptocurrency, and he is alleged to have taken more than $27.6 million through NetWalker scams. Interestingly enough, police in Bulgaria also recovered what has been called a dark web resource that was used by the group, and tech experts are working to see if anything they found might help the investigation of past or future attacks, such as decryption keys. So obviously, these groups are worldwide. Canada and Bulgaria, obviously that's a pretty big distance. Hopefully, NetWalker will be completely taken down. And when I actually go to their leak site in the dark web, sure enough, it says it has been seized by federal authorities. So that is good news, for law enforcement. Moving on, let's talk about Perl.com. That's Perl.com, meaning the programming language, not the pearls that you wear. Now, the domain name Perl.com was stolen and now points to an IP address associated with malware campaigns. Now, here's what's going on. Perl.com has been owned by Tom Christensen since 1997 to post news and articles about the Perl programming language. On January 27th, the editor of Perl.com, Brian D. Foy, tweeted that Perl.com was suddenly registered to another person. The domain was apparently stolen in September of 2020 while it was at Network Solutions, and then it was registered or transferred to a registrar in China on Christmas Day, probably when nobody here would be looking at it, and finally moved to the Key Systems Registrar on January 27th of 2020. They're obviously looking to get that back, but right now, if you go to Perl.com, you shouldn't. It points to malware. Moving on, let's talk about Ramsey County. I'm not sure where Ramsey County is, but I know it's in the United States. Their officials are releasing details of a data security incident in which hackers potentially accessed the personal information of thousands of residents. This past Friday, the county announced that one of its technology service vendors, NetGain Technology, was hit on December 2nd with, and I quote, a malicious outside hacker attempting to extort payment from the company in a ransomware scheme. Now, a technical analysis, found that as many as 8,700 people may have had their data accessed. All are clients of one of the county's public health programs. And so the attackers possibly got access to names, address, dates of birth, date of service, telephone numbers, account numbers, and health insurance information, as well as medical information as well. So obviously that's a huge problem. So if you're in Ramsey County, whichever Ramsey County you're in, you might want to check in. Moving on, let's head on back to the UK because we're going to be talking about the UK Research and Innovation. Now, apparently that is, or UKRI. Now, apparently the UKRI is dealing with a ransomware incident that encrypted their data and impacted two of their services. One basically offering information to subscribers and the platform for peer review for various parts of this agency. Now, the disclosure is scarce in details about how this attack happened or who was behind it, and to quote, we have reported the incident to the National Crime Agency, the National Cybersecurity Center, and Information Commissioner's Office. Now, the two services affected by this incident are a portal for the UKRI, known as the UK Research Office, or UKRO, which is based in Brussels, and offers an information service to subscribers to an extranet that UKRI councils use for their peer review activities. Both services have been suspended, and so hopefully they will get back online. Moving on, let's head on up to Canada and talk about Peel District School Board out of Toronto, because they said on this past Thursday that they had been hit by a cybersecurity incident, but online classes would continue as normal. In a statement posted on Twitter, the school board said that it had discovered, quote, a cybersecurity incident that resulted in the encryption of certain PDSB files and systems. This was on Tuesday. At this stage, there is no reason to believe that any personal or sensitive information was compromised as a result of this incident, and we are confident that we will be able to restore the affected systems and files. Hopefully, the Peel District School Board in Toronto will get back online. Moving on, let's talk about Mensa in the United Kingdom. Mensa is the high IQ society, if you are not aware, because British Mensa failed to properly secure their passwords on their website, prompting a hack of their website that resulted in the theft of members' personal data. Now, Eugene Hopkinson, the former director and technology officer at British Mensa, stood down this week claiming that the organization had failed to secure data of its 18,000 members properly, according to a report in the Financial Times. Hopkinson claimed that the stored passwords of Mensa were not hashed, meaning they could be read. And I don't think it takes a high IQ to encrypt your passwords. So, haha, there you go. British Mensa, I hope you get back online soon. Moving on. Let's talk about the American corrugated packaging company known as WestRock, because they just announced they're a victim of a ransomware attack that impacted both their information technology and operational technology systems. Now, WestRock did not share details about their security incident, only that it confirmed its staff discovered the attack on January 23rd, and the company reported the ransomware attack to law enforcement and notified its customers, and they are obviously responding. So hopefully WestRock will be getting back on their feet soon. Moving on, let's talk about Vipgames.com. That's Vipgames.com, because tens of thousands of their users have their personal details exposed after basically the gaming site misconfigured their Elasticsearch server where all of their information was sitting on. Now, a research team at WizCase found the wide open server with zero encryption and no password protection, meaning if you have a password with VIP Games, I could have read it. Basically, they found all of this through a simple search. It was traced back, this server, to VIP Games, which is basically a popular free-to-play card and board game with 100,000 Google Play downloads and roughly 20,000 active daily players globally. Over 30 gig of data was leaked, including 23 million records. Now, in this batch that was leaked, the researchers picked out 66,000 user profiles, including usernames, email, device details, IP addresses, hashed passwords. So now they're saying it's hashed passwords in the disclosure, but initially they said that there was none. So I'm going to be very curious. I'll probably update you on that next week. Also, not to mention Facebook, Twitter, and Google IDs, in-game transaction details, bets, and details regarding banned players. So a little bit of conflicting information there. We'll see what happens, but that obviously is a huge problem. Either that or the passwords that weren't encrypted were the administrative passwords, which is even worse. Moving on, let's head over to Pakistan to a Karachi-based company known as Vipgames. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. They exposed all of their production server information and allowed access to over 200 gigabytes of data containing more than 400 million records showing people's full names, locations, and other personal information that could potentially be used by attackers to cause financial and reputational damage. Once again, this is an Elasticsearch instance that was left publicly exposed without password protection or encryption, meaning anybody basically with the address of this server could access the database and basically copy out the data. It appeared that in September of 2020, interestingly enough, Vipgames also suffered a separate breach during which unidentified attackers reportedly deleted the company's entire database, which they apparently restored from backup. Looks like they didn't secure it again. Moving on, let's head down under to the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, or ASIC. They just admitted that one of their servers was accessed without authorization and may have basically been hit. Now, the country's company and financial services regulator, which is what they are, became aware of this incident on the 15th of January, which it said was, quote, related to Excellion software used by ASIC to transfer files and attachments. Now, the attack involved a server containing documents associated with the Australian credit applications, and the commission warned that, quote, some limited information may have been viewed by the threat actor. ASIC was at pains to add that it hadn't seen evidence of the forms and attachments being opened or downloaded. So we will see as the forensics continue there. But heads up, if you have anything to do with the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, you might want to look into that. Moving on, let's talk about the privacy violating app Tock, because they are on my list this week. Cybersecurity researchers, that's what I saw in my brain, this past Tuesday disclosed a now patched security flaw in Tock that could have been potentially enabled, enabled an attacker to build a database of the app's users and their associated phone numbers for future malicious activity. Now, although this flaw only impacts those users who have a linked phone number with their account or logged in with the phone number. The successful exploitation of this vulnerability could have resulted in data leakage and privacy violation. Now, this newly discovered bug, which as I mentioned has been patched, resides in TikTok's Find Friends feature that allows users to sync their contacts with the service to identify potential people to follow. Obviously a huge problem, and if you're linking anything to TikTok, understand that that is going to a foreign government. Nobody should be using that platform. Moving on, let's talk about 250 Oracle and Atlassian servers that belong mainly to organizations providing mobile communications and internet-based services. Now, according to reports, a group called Volatile Cedar, which is an advanced hacker group believed to be connected to the Lebanese Hezbollah cyber unit, has been silently attacking companies around the world in espionage operations. They're also known as Lebanese Cedar, and the attackers have basically been active since 2012, but fell off the radar in 2015, and they came back in early 2020, and so they started targeting these Atlassian and Oracle servers, 250 of them, and these are servers that are unpatched, which really underscores why you need to patch absolutely everything in your life. Update your Oracle and Atlassian servers in the same way you update your phone or Windows or whatever you've got in your life. Please keep updating. Otherwise, you're probably going to be on this list at some point. Moving on. Let's talk about Honey Baked Ham, the company Honey Baked Ham. I know they're in the United States. I don't know if they're elsewhere. They got hit on December 13th with ransomware, according to their disclosure to Vermont, and possible social security and date of birth information was hit. So this is an issue for their employees. So if you work for Honey Baked Ham, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about Florida Healthy Kids, because those who use the Florida Healthy Kids Corporation, their services, might want to check their personal information. The company says that one of their vendors experienced a cybersecurity incident involving the personal data of online applicants and enrollees. And to quote, FHKC has no confirmation at this time that anyone's personal information was removed from the system. Now, the company in question, Jelly Bean Communications Design, was responsible for hosting the website at this time and basically was tapped into the December of 2020 breach, according to the release. Now, also according to this press release, several thousand applicants' addresses were, quote, inappropriately accessed and possibly tampered with. Now, cybersecurity experts found vulnerabilities in the hosted website platform and the databases that support this online application. So that's obviously a very huge problem. So if you use Florida Healthy Kids Corporation, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about Galston and Ward Family and Cosmetic Dentistry in Virginia. They actually received a phone call from a group claiming to have infected their computer servers with a virus and demanding a ransom. Now, prior to this call, from this group seeking ransom, they noticed, according to their disclosure, anomalies with their computer system and engaged their outside IT vendor to wipe the servers and reinstall from backup. They say there was no significant disruption of service or loss of data. No ransom was paid. And it is understood that the intrusion into the computer server took place between August 31st of last year and September 1. And on September 11th of 2020, they learned that several files from their server were posted to a website on the dark web, but those files did not contain any information from their patient database. So hopefully we're not going to have any kind of HIPAA violation. Those patients are safe. But again, heads up to you if you use the Galston and Ward Family and Cosmetic Dentistry outfit in the state of Virginia. Moving on, and finally, and we have two big finalies for you this week because it has been nuts. I need to give you guys an update on Mimecast, Palo Alto Networks, Qualys, and Fidelis. Yes, 4 major cybersecurity vendors this week, and we are talking about SolarWinds because these 4 have basically added their names to the list of cybersecurity companies that have installed Trojanized versions of the SolarWinds Orion application. And we are going to start with Mimecast, and I have a personal note on this one too. But before I say that, 2 weeks ago, the company disclosed a major security breach during which attackers broke into their network and used digital certificates used by one of the security products to access the Microsoft 365 accounts of some of their customers. Now, in an update to their blog the other day, Minecraft said that it linked this incident to a Trojanized SolarWinds Orion app or application installed on its network. Now, the company has now confirmed that the SolarWinds attackers are the ones who abuse that certificate to go after Mimecast customers. Now, I think this one is interesting because I was literally on the air last night with Tech Time Radio, who broadcasts out of Seattle. I was on live with them talking about this. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because the initial Mimecast reports, and every time I go on air, they said, hey, why don't you come and talk about the Mimecast thing for a few minutes? I said, absolutely. So I do my homework on this. I did my homework yesterday afternoon around, I would say, 5 p.m. Central Time here in the United States or so, and I did not see this report. All of the original reports basically said that Mimecast did not use the SolarWinds Orion, but the attacking group that hit them was suspected to be the same ones that basically hit SolarWinds as well. Mimecast is always going to be targeted as our major cybersecurity vendors for this kind of stuff, and reports have shown that about 30% of those targeted by the attackers, we believe it's APT or Advanced Persistent Threat 29, also known as Cozy Bear, didn't actually use, 30% of the victims didn't actually have Orion installed, and Mimecast was considered one of those until this very recent disclosure. And so I went on air last night and basically said, no, they didn't have Orion, but they got hit by the same people. And so consider this a bit of a correction as well. I also reached out to one of the hosts, Nathan, to let him know that as well, because, obviously we want to be as accurate as possible here. Moving on. Let's talk about Qualys, another major vendor. They make scanning and vulnerability scanning software. In a statement to Forbes, Qualys said that the intrusion was not as big as it appears, claiming that one of their engineers actually installed the Trojanized version of the SolarWinds Orion application inside a lab environment for testing purposes, which was actually separate from their primary network. A subsequent investigation, according to them, did not find any evidence of further malicious activity or data exfiltration. But despite Qualys' statement, some security researchers are not actually buying what Qualys is saying, suggesting that one of the domains hit, corp.qualys.com, hinted that the attackers accessed the primary network and not a lab environment, as Qualys claimed. So we'll see. Is this a thing to mitigate? Is Qualys 100% accurate? Time will tell. We will see what happens. Moving on, let's talk about Palo Alto Networks, one of the 4 vendors I'm talking about today. Obviously, one of the enterprise security makers of firewalls and other things. Excellent company typically. In a blog post, Palo Alto said that they detected 2 security incidents in September and October of 2020 that were now linked to the SolarWinds software installations. And to quote Palo Alto Networks, our security operations center immediately isolated the server, initiated an investigation, and verified our infrastructure was secure. However, the company said that at the time it investigated each of these breaches, it did it as separate incidents and didn't detect the broader supply chain attack. And quite frankly, nobody did. We were all in that boat, including obviously Palo Alto Networks. Its investigation into last year's September and October intrusions concluded, and I quote, the attempted attack was unsuccessful and no data was compromised. So hopefully Palo Alto continues to remain secure. And the last one I want to talk about of the 4 big vendors is Fidelis. Now, their execs said that they too installed the Trojanized version of the SolarWinds Orion application in May of 2020. If you recall, that Trojanized version came out in March of 2020. So they were a couple months back, apparently either patching or upgrading as part of their software evaluation. They were evaluating it apparently. And to quote one of their executives, the software installation was traced to a machine configured as a test system isolated from our core network and infrequently powered on. If it was powered on, it probably was talking though. Now, Fidelis said that despite the efforts from the attacker to escalate their access inside the Fidelis internal network, the company believes that the test system was, quote, sufficiently isolated and powered up too infrequently for the attacker to take it to the next stage of the attack. Obviously, we are hoping that's true. Now, this week's disclosure of these 4 companies brings the total number of major cybersecurity vendors targeted by the SolarWinds attackers, again, believed to be APT 29, and now it brings that total to 8. Previous disclosures, which I have talked about in Breaches of the Week and other videos, is FireEye. Obviously, they're the ones that discovered this intrusion. Microsoft, who hosts Office 365, that has seen a lot of certificate attacks, which I literally mentioned on the air yesterday and in other videos as well, and CrowdStrike as well, obviously a threat detection company as well. They say that was a failed intrusion, and then Malwarebytes, who disclosed that the attackers accessed some of the company's email accounts, obviously through 365. So that is your list up to 8, and hopefully all of our cybersecurity vendors will be secure. And finally, let's revisit the 2020 leaks and breaches, because stats are starting to come in as our surveys, and they are really telling, because some new research from Imperva warned the other day that unauthorized transmission of data from organizations' networks to external destinations grew by 93% in 2020. Now, Imperva detected 883,865 such incidents at the start of the year, rising to 1.7 million by the end of December, and they argue that the figure would be even higher if loss of data via physical devices, printouts, and other options like that were actually included in their numbers. However, consumers also have a big part to play in keeping their information out of harm's way. According to research by Entrust, 77% told Entrust that they are concerned about data privacy, and 64% said that their awareness about the issue has increased over the past 12 months, which makes sense. Obviously, we all got scrambling to move from home. Cyber attacks ramped up against home users in a way we've never seen, because home users are now accessing businesses. I mean, it's all this vicious cycle, and that's why we saw phishing explode. But at the same time, though many, 63%, were willing to hand over more information to applications in return for greater personalization. Meaning 63% of us said, if you give me more personalization, here's my data. Nearly half, 47%, said that they don't review the terms and conditions of the app before downloading. I think that number's way higher. I think people are lying. It's probably like 95%. And most claim it's because it takes too long to read. I am one of those nerds that will sit down and read and investigate the company, or where are they based out of, the country that they're in, do they have good privacy laws, and on and on. But we are not done with this, because another survey by iProve finds that 3/4 of their respondents have had to change their password due to a data security breach, and that is up by more than 10% over 2019. Additionally, more than 2/3 of respondents have had to change their password 2 or more times due to a data breach that has just basically happened in their life. Now, this is especially relevant now because we have this global pandemic that's been forcing people to work remote, and on and on and on. But the survey also had some really interesting stats by virtue of that. 95% of respondents said that they cared about their data privacy, which directly conflicts with the 63% that said, I will give up privacy for more personalization. That's iProve. 2/3 of respondents at iProve are annoyed by having to change their password, and it always is annoying, but it's one of those necessary evils. And 25% of respondents feel like they have no control over their data, which I think actually goes to show that we have a little bit of a problem with, one, knowing, or at least 1/4 of us know, that if we're uploading it to Google or Facebook or Apple or whatever it is, it can be data mined, that their encryption policies for privacy are not going to be there, that we're basically being data mined to be advertised to. I'll throw Amazon into that bucket. But where we want to balance that is the understanding of, well, we're using Google, so it's going to be data mined, versus a feeling of hopelessness. We've also seen depression numbers rise vastly by virtue of this pandemic, and I think that is something that we need to combat. And if we are adding to this, well, I'm just going to get data mined and I'm going to get data breached, the last thing we want to do is just drive people to give up. What we need to make sure is that we are energizing and encouraging our users, our followers, whatever that is, to make sure that you do have good cyber hygiene. You can make good choices for data privacy. For example, internal communications with my family and all that kind of stuff, from all over. I don't use Facebook Messenger for that primarily. We use Slack. It's free. You can set it up. It's way more private. Slack doesn't have any advertising in the portal or anything along those lines. It's a much more controlled environment, and they will adhere to compliances. And I can pay a little bit more to vastly increase the space. and we can share freely whatever it is without the data mining, the censorship, the whatever that is that a Facebook is going to have or a Google is going to have. These are things that we can consider. There are better email alternatives that won't data mine you as well. If you're on Gmail, you can move to Proton Mail. Proton Mail is out of Switzerland. They're very secure. These are the kinds of things that we're talking about. And as long as we're aware of these things and we can basically start retaking back and claiming some of our data, I think that's a very good thing. So that is your breaches of the week. Everybody was basically affected thanks to SolarWinds, and hopefully you guys are having a good weekend. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.